Welcome everyone. I hope once again that you are all safe, that you are all well, that you're practicing. Those of us perhaps. That's my favorite thing to do, I must say. And may I ask if you can hear me? It's hard to believe that already another Friday has come by. I feel like it was just yesterday that I did this talk. And here we are. The world is opening up, and we are entering, I would say, perhaps the most dangerous time in this time of a pandemic. Together with countries opening, with having more social gatherings, the world is now approaching already 6 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. And of course, the United States has passed the grisly statistic of 100,000 fatalities. Actually, there are already 102,000 fatalities or more in the United States. It's terribly tragic, something which had the United States and the world been more prepared for, we all could have avoided. But we have to try to avoid further catastrophe, I must say, due to this little virus. Okay. Anyway, again, I hope that you are all well. And what do we have to talk about today in our little community of lovers of music, of lovers of art? And that is what I want to talk about, I should say, is about the primal nature of structure in music. Very often we hear that, oh, you know, I don't care, the structure, this, I just want to feel music. But what we feel is actually structure. And this is what I hope that I will make clear as our little session continues today. So structure is everything, I say, in music, because what is music is connections. Connections of sound, connections of color, connections of dynamics, and, of course, the way they are connected creates emotion. So if you have one note, I don't think that does much of anything. But you can have one note, and it can have different dynamics. So, actually, I wasn't planning on doing this, but I think I will. I'll take a clarinet. Maybe I take this one here. And of course, I should wet the reed. So, again, we take one note, and the note I usually like is written G. That, even something like that, has a certain character. Perhaps the absence of character gives it a certain character. But let's do this now. certain length and a certain shape. That shape is structure as it moves down. And that creates a different kind of sensation in us, I would say. We can do that also creates a different shape. A different shape. And you probably remember the creative long tones I was talking about a few weeks ago. It seems like just a few days ago. So even on single notes, there is structure. Yeah. And in a piece of music, there is structure on many different levels. And you have, in classical music, you have ABA form, so you have a return, and that return is part of structure. You have a sonata allegro form, you have rondo forms, all these things that we learn in school, and this is all structure. And you say, okay, that's great, but what does this have to do with expression particularly? And what it has to do with is what composers do with form. And also, in form, we have different levels. So we can almost say that music, artistic compositions, are created in a certain way out of fractals. So you have something that's large form, smaller form, smaller form, smaller form, tiny form. So even an appoggiatura actually creates a kind of form. So I'm going to examine different ways that composers create expression through form. And why is it important for us to know that? Because as performers, we actually participate, in a sense, in the composition of the work, the musical work. Because we actually, performers I should say, we take the sketch, we take the blueprint, let's say, and we actually construct the work from that. Now, if we understand form, I should say even if we feel form, and this is what I'm going to try to get to, then we can actually create a more compelling composition. It's quite hot in here, so I have a little bit of an issue. Anyway, this is the beginning of summer. I know. Like that, yes. Okay, so I put this away. And I go to the piano. I'm basically going to work at the piano and show different things. I apologize that I didn't actually write out and send out a list of compositions. Here goes. Thank you. Yeah, much better, much better. I didn't send out a list of compositions because I kept on thinking, well, should I use this composition? Should I use that? Okay, 1 second. There's something. Oh, no, let me keep it. Thank you, thank you. because I will need it again. We could actually pass it around a few times. That would be kind of fun. But as I was mentioning, I was thinking about, well, should I use this piece? Should I use that piece? I should use symphonies? Should I go to new music? What should I do? And I came, in my mind, I sort of came across so many different pieces which I could use as examples that I thought, oh, there's no way I can. I'm just going to figure out at the moment, and I will use pieces which are very familiar, I hope, to everyone, and just a few. Of course, I will go back to the Mozart Concerto, as that's because I mentioned it in the introduction I wrote, and also because it is very, very interesting in many regards in terms of how Mozart creates drama, creates character, changes character, okay, through structure. Okay. And I should mention also that the largest structure that we have most often is the least important for us. Well, let me put this somewhere. This is kind of funny. I'm doing this all the time here. Thank you. And by that I mean the more sort of kind of stable the large structure is, the less, in a way, we have to worry about it, because it is there. It's like in a building, you have the actual skeleton of the building. That's what, and it's very important, because without the skeleton working a certain way, the whole thing would fall. But then you have different levels of finishing of the building, including interiors, and they become more and more and more interesting. I'm sure that many of you have heard of the great theorist Heinrich Schenker. I would say that I'm a practical Schenkerian. I have big problems with some of what he has done, some of his philosophy, some of his ideas. This is not the time for me to go into that. If any of you want to ask me about that, I can probably write you privately. That would probably be more sort of apropos of what I would need to do to discuss Schenker in detail. But what I loved was Schoenberg's statement when he saw one of Schenker's diagrams, and it showed the motions here through dominant, finally going to the tonic, and how you have ornamental notes going down, etc., etc. And Schoenberg looked at it, and he said, but it's missing all my favorite parts. Now, as performer, we need to be concerned not only with this big structure, let's say, but with the little structure which actually constitutes the favorite parts. Okay, so I'm going to start from the very small and then go larger and larger this way. So I should go to the piano, I think, and start with this. Do I have any questions now about anything? No. Okay. If anyone has a question while I'm doing this, please actually don't hesitate to sort of put in your 2 cents, and I will try to answer what I can answer. Okay. Because I probably will forget, before I start to do this and get involved and sort of forget myself, what I would like to do is just mention that I still have openings for mini lessons, which I will be giving throughout the summertime. So anybody who has a particular problem or would like information about something and would like a mini lesson, please feel free to let me know about that, and I will put you on the list and you will actually have your lesson. Also, I may have missed some of you who asked for lessons, so if I haven't contacted you yet, perhaps you should renew your query about mini lessons, so that I know who you are, and I promise that I don't forget any of you on purpose, and I don't want to forget any of you. Okay, with that said, I go to the piano and begin with what I mean. Okay. Now, can you see me here? Is that... Okay. So I will begin with Schumann, and just the opening of the fantasy pieces. It's Opus 73, of course. And we, in the clarinet, we have this. Okay. And he has markings. It's piano. Then he has the hairpins, these two hairpins, going up to the concert F. And then it goes down. And before that, and then continues in the piano part. But I'm concerned now just with this little phrase. Okay, because I hear it played in many ways, but we look at it and we can see that there is a basic structure to it. And that structure is that. So it's this, which of course goes that. So that in certain ways is very simple. But this basic structure has particular sense of expression. And Schumann tries to show this to you with this marking here on the A-flat concert F. Because he could have done this. He could have done other things too. No, but he does. He goes up that way. So he picks the music up this way, and then okay. So this is kind of structure that we have, which is moving structure. So that works this way, and then falls. Then what does he do? He adds ornament to this. From this structure, he adds ornament, and the ornament is in the form, of course, of appoggiaturas, which we talked about very early and about how the appoggiatura creates expression in music. So, so it moves that way. He could have even done, that would sound really ridiculous, but this is what is our primary expression. I can do this again. So it's and then, after picking up, he does something else. He adds two more notes. And they're also appoggiaturas. They're different kind of appoggiaturas, though, because they are this. So as generally in music, these half steps create intensity. And then the suspended fourth resolves to that way. Is this too noisy here? Do you hear this? Too noisy, my chair?
Okay.
It's okay?
What can I do?
Okay. So, sorry. Here it's very noisy, so I'm going this and going. This is a counterpoint. I have the chair counterpoint, which reminded me of a fantastic piece of music which the composer Lamont Young wrote around 1960, which was for furniture. Perhaps I'll talk about that another day, but I think all of a sudden I had this image in my mind. So, once again, so already this shape that we have gives particular kind of expression and kind of emotion, which is not so simple, because then this way, and these can be repeated, and in fact we get something like the beginning of the Egmont Overture, not the very beginning of course, but from as it moves into its allegro part, and of course Beethoven did everything to the nth degree. So this gesture in Beethoven's hand became something in a certain way monumental. In Schumann it becomes more intimate. Just okay. So the question I have now for everyone is, why am I talking about this as we play the clarinet? Because, let me try this. Can you see? I have another clarinet here. Again, I wet my reed. Most of the times I hear this like this. Okay. I play Schumann. No. If we understand the emotion of the structure, it picks up this way, and these there, becomes something which is deeply moving. I could keep going with this piece for hours, but I'm going to move on to something else now. And what is most interesting, I find, about performing arts, and music in particular, of course I'm a musician, so I have a vested interest in this, is the centrality of memory. Okay. So we remember things, and our memory creates expectations. And the structure we understand because of memory. Because as things move on, we see this line that's moving, and we remember what was. And when we come to do it again, we have a flash of recognition, perhaps. Or if it's not quite the same, we have recognition and then surprise. Or if the music turns to something completely different, we have perhaps great surprise. Now, composers, as they create these structures in time, work with these elements to create interest, to create emotion, as I would say, to create character, to create all sorts of images even that people can have this way. And what we as performers should look at and look for is, I would say, would be the quirks of structure. So how composers takes something and actually turns it in another way. And with that, I go to Saint-Saëns, his first movement of his sonata, this Opus 167. This is one of the very last pieces that he wrote. Again, I'm trying to use works which are very familiar to at least a majority of you who are watching. No. Okay, this piece has, first of all, involves memory on many levels, of course. One level is at the very beginning, as we're in E-flat major. Educated in music, you listen to this, and even if you don't think or you don't recognize the connection, somehow it makes an impression. It goes, and from the very beginning you say, this piece is somehow very familiar. Okay, but this is something different. What do I want to show in this piece, and what do I find notable about it in terms of structure and how we can bring out character and drama if we understand structure? Okay, and for that I take the beginning of this, and if we move to here, this place here, where we go we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 measures that way, going to this place. Then you have this kind of second part, which we can call a codetta, yeah. And then it goes on to its development section. And we don't know if we're in C minor or in E flat or in F minor or whatever. And then it goes into other keys, etc., etc. These don't interest me right now. And then he goes back. So this is very, very academic, we can say, sonata form. With the sense that you have an exposition, you have the development, you have a recapitulation. And we start from here. And then going on. And what should it do? It should do that. And in fact, formally, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 measures, exactly the same amount, the same kind of phrase structure, very academic phrase structure, where you have this one small short phrase, then a long phrase, which is the way I would say perhaps even 90% of classical pieces have been constructed that way. So you have this very overtly academic form here, but what does he do? Yeah. From this place here, where I give he extends. Melodically, what he has done is he has, instead of with this, I don't know why I keep, instead of moving back to here, he has extended this last measure basically all the way through as it continues. And then it moves on to the actual recapitulation of the piece. So why am I pointing this out? Because what Saint-Saëns has done in this little, very, in a certain way, simple piece is in fact something not so simple. And this is this fundamental nature of the expressiveness of structure here, where he has taken things which are the same, but in the recapitulation you have kind of a mirror, but that mirror is not clear. It's not the beginning, but it has the memory of the beginning, but it continues from the middle section until finally those 10 measures end and we come back to a recapitulation of the opening. I find that actually quite fascinating, and as a performer, this is very important, because if you don't understand this, the way, actually I should say, it's not simply structure, because the overt structure is very academic. The way that Saint-Saëns has taken this academic structure and remade it, in a way, if we don't understand that, then the whole second part of the piece, I would say, or sort of this the third part, let's say, because you have the middle section and so part, is quite boring. And not only boring, but a little bit weird, I would say, because you have, instead of this, you have this. Then here, you have things like that, which are like, whoa, what is this? Kind of this. Something like that happening in this. It's like, oh, this is weird music all of a sudden. No. Because what he has done is with this extension from here, this finally to there is very, very different from the opening. So Saint-Saëns has taken this academic structure and twisted it to create much, much greater and more fascinating kind of expression. Okay, enough of this. I move on, and what should I do next? This, I go back. I think I should move to Brahms, and I will look at his trio just a little bit, and I look at two things. First in the first movement and in the second movement. Yeah. And Brahms is fascinating, and this is of course a huge subject, because he connects the smallest elements in his sort of middle motivic elements with larger gestures and perhaps with the largest sense of form. Now we take this piece and we see what is most important in this F minor, what am I talking about? I'm sorry, A minor piece is the motion to F, whether it's that or whether it is that, or whether it is that going up, and in fact it is the A minor to here to the F, and then that way. So if we see this basic sense of form, the tension going to F, and then a resolution in major, we get an idea of the overall form of this first movement. Now, if we take the very opening of that, and then this opening is he is given, I would say, an abstract or précis, whatever, of the actual form of the piece. So, in other words, he was saying, listen to this. This is what I'm going to do. Yeah. So we have in this, we have a sort of abstract of the form, which then takes a larger manifestation, I should say. But not simply that. And then, just in case people were not listening, we have the next thing here. And then we have going to F again. And then again the F. 1, 2. Again to A major. So, once again, he has gone through the form of this piece. Its motion from the A minor to through the F back to A major. As if he's saying, in case you didn't pay attention at the beginning, I'm going to do this again for you. And along with that, of course, he presents all the material that he's going to use to create this edifice, which is the first movement of this piece. And then, of course, and then we have here, and then from there, the piece begins and continues. So, okay. Then after presenting this material, what does he do in this piece? And I'm going to look at just little details in this. Yeah. First of all, remember how we go from the F and we resolve in A major. And what he does throughout this piece is he moves to major, not simply A major, but to major, let's say. So even here, we have this. And then this should go that way. No, he doesn't do that. Then, but he cancels. So he moves to major and then cancels it. Yeah. And he does that many times throughout this piece. We have it later on in when we have then we have here, then again C sharp, that way. And only at the very end of the piece, after here, I have a F, and then he keeps going. Does he find his resolution in A major? This way. So we see this piece then, and of course I'm just doing very basic, I wouldn't even call this an analysis, sort of observation of this. how he moves, comes back, moves, comes back, moves, and then finally ends this way. Now let's look at something else here, which is also very important. And this is something I'm going to show also in Mozart and in maybe more of Brahms. We'll see what kind of time I have. But it has to do with what I call a contrast, okay, of expectation. And this is again how the composer will use the memory of form to create character and create emotion and to structure the piece in a way which catches people's attention. And what we need as performers, especially, to understand in order to bring this out. Okay, so this is at the end of this exposition of this is here, and we have the closing theme, which is and then the clarinet comes in. And the clarinet could have done this. And then here. And then we go into E minor, of course. But he doesn't do that. The first thing he does when the clarinet comes in, it starts, of course, in exactly the same way as I've just played. Then we have the... Then, instead of... Wow, how did I get there? So, in the very short term, he takes this... and we create an expectation of this. Okay, good. And if there's any kind of question at all, please let me know. So we take this and we start the same way, and then all of a sudden we take a wrong turn. So, and then here, and then he kicks that F here to make it more ominous, of course. And what's quite interesting is you only have piano here and diminuendo in the clarinet part. That's because he's building up tension in this. This is like one of the great organ preludes of Bach all of a sudden. I like to ornament that a bit, but not when I play for real. So this has a great moment of intensity that happens here. Then he has his recapitulation. And I mean, formally, this piece is actually quite remarkable, and this is not the place to maybe it should be, because it seems so normal, yet it's not at all normal. But what I go through here is we come back to, no, not here, it's before, yeah, it's here. And we start, of course, and it's the cello now playing. And if anything, this is more agitated than the opening, because we have the piano. And even here, but what happens in this place here is, instead of leading, as you do in the beginning, to this kind of tragic motion, finally to E minor, as it were, what we have here is, after this build-up, the same kind of again. And it's interesting that Brahms tells us that this is going to be different, tells us as performers, because he writes diminuendo here for the clarinet, which he didn't in the beginning. In fact, he did at first, and then he actually crossed that one out. But we have here this, and then we have this, and then here, he goes to the calmest place of the piece. Ends up being, etc., from the Opus 119 intermezzo, and so. But this is this from here. It's very mysterious, I would say, and colorful and beautiful, but also very, very calm section. So, what am I trying to show in this? Is Brahms has set up an expectation of kind of pathos, I would say, but instead he moves to something very calm in a second. And that can be incredibly moving and incredibly striking. But if we're performers, if we don't understand this contrast that Brahms, structural contrast, I would say, that Brahms has set up, if we don't feel it, even more than just simply understand it, we miss the point of the piece. So that's kind of wonderful example of this, the way composers set up contrast in structure, and something we have to really kind of seek out, I would say, to create performances of character. Since I always lose track of time, I'm wondering how am I doing with time? Okay. Okay, whatever. I will continue a bit. I should continue with Brahms perhaps, but I think I will move already to Mozart. And then I will go to Brahms at the very end, if I have time, back to him. So we go back to our wonderful Mozart concerto here. And I want to especially just show how Mozart also sets up, in terms of form, this wonderful kind of dramatic contrast. Okay, and this has to do with two parts, which are virtually the same. The first one, in C major, is this. And the second one in D major, in the second part, which I don't know what you want to call it, the development section, you may. That way. And they are orchestrated in the same way, and the only difference is that they are one step apart. Okay, but let's now look at that second one. And this is after here. So we are in D major as we go, as we have come from here. Specifically because I hear this passage very often played, and I'm always disappointed, I can say saddened actually. I become very sad when I listen to this often, because Mozart is trying to do something, and in a very specific way, and in a brilliant way, but I don't hear it generally when I listen to performances of this piece. Okay, so what is he doing here? The important thing to realize is that he's going to F sharp minor. To this kind of very, all of a sudden, incredibly dramatic or just about violent middle part here to this tutti, which doesn't come back, was not really announced before, is almost seems like it's not part of this piece at all. But of course it's very central because it is F sharp minor, and this F sharp minor in this A major piece is very critical to this piece. Okay, so he wants to go to this very dramatic F sharp minor. Now, let's go back to this part. Then he changes character. This whole thing. It becomes very agitated, very dramatic at that point. Okay, now let's look at this part here. What Mozart could have done is he's again from here, D major, so nice. He could have done would be okay. And this is probably what, if you go and study composition in school, for instance, this would be a good way to have a bridge to this tutti final that you have there. But does Mozart do this? No, he doesn't. And this is what is critical. So instead of moving here, I'm mixing myself up now. I get excited. He does this. In the accompaniment here, we have this. It is the opposite of what we have in the beginning in C major. So in fact what is happening here is we have this going, this it's like the same, but no. What's going to happen? And then he could have done that, and then, but he doesn't do that. After this part here, so this, he goes down, and then he continues. But he continues that. No, he doesn't do that either. So he goes from, sorry. Okay. And, by the way, remember this. I do not get into it now, but I'll have another live stream devoted almost exclusively to this. And from there, even there, he could have just gone on, but he doesn't do that either. He gives you a hint of this with this, and instead of this, he could have gone to here. But he doesn't do that either. At the end of this, here, this is, he goes, wow, he's in G major after this. How do we get there? And again, remember this? Starts to move from there. And these four measures are quite extraordinary. In fact, I think at the time they would have been so extraordinary that they would not have been ornamented. I'm sure that Stadler did ornament. Mozart, of course, in his own playing would ornament quite a bit, but I think these four measures would not be ornamented. And in fact, it's very interesting that the arrangement by Schwenk, which I mentioned earlier in one of the earlier live streams, for string quartet and piano, which is very heavily ornamented in many ways, in these four measures is not ornamented at all. And this is in his piano. He's just doing that. I thought that's very interesting. And it's just because it is so extraordinary in this kind of unexpected way. Yeah. And then finally, to there. Finally, we get to this big F-sharp minor section. So, this development section of this piece, or I could say this middle part here, is an incredible example of the buildup of tension through, I don't know, we could call it abstinence. Or sort of a moving, then no. Moving, then no. Moving, no. And then finally, it's sort of like if you're taking a bowl and you keep pulling it back, pulling it, until this finally tension is so great. It has to move like that. That's what this section is. But the way I usually hear it is just like this part. This one here. That way, it's totally ordinary. Despite all that Mozart has written into it, that he has put into this, despite his orchestration, which, as opposed to the beginning, is incredibly sparse here, in spite of everything, we do not understand the dramatic intent of this passage. But if we do understand that, if we do understand the way Mozart is using this, what I call this contrast of expectation, the way he is structuring this piece in that way, which, if we do understand that, and instead of everything else, we have and then people hear and said, wait, I remember that, but this is so different. Then it keeps building, and then comes back, keeps building, and comes back. And then finally we're in G major here, which is totally out of the blue. And then from there, we go back to, and then finally, we have this huge explosion there. It's amazing, I think. It's such a model for all composers, I would say, of how to build tension in music. And of course, it would not work if we didn't have the opening in this way, which is very nice, then going into something which was kind of agitato in a very normal way. So this is, I'm in constant admiration of this section here. I think it is incredibly brilliant. Okay, I want to do one more thing in the Mozart Concerto, if I have time. Yeah, and this is in the second movement. Okay. And it's something very similar, but doesn't involve something in the beginning and the end, but it involves something that is actually side by side. And this is the coda of this. And I have to say that what I'm returning to in a certain way is what I ended with last time, which was sort of my pet peeves. This is a part of it. But this has to do with understanding or sort of feeling the structure there. So we have this going on after that. And then we have this. And then. And normally, people will play the next one softer, kind of echo. And then we have this. And then it happens again. But why, when I hear this, or I see it this way, why does it seem to me to be so unsatisfying? Okay, there are two things here. First, we have to understand, and this I come back to a little bit of knowledge, is actually not so terrible, that in classical music, for instance, it's not so common that the second time something happens, it's an echo. I wouldn't say that it never happens, and there are cases, even in the concerto, where it makes perfect sense. But the echo here is very problematic, and it's problematic because of this measure, which is the most active, kind of, I could call a full cadence in this whole piece, this whole movement, which and after that, the piece is over. So he could have done something like it's always very easy to do something very academic. But that would be something that perhaps well-schooled composer who's fairly good would do. But Mozart doesn't do this. But he sets this up. And that should be actually a kind of grand gesture. And in order to understand this, we have to go on. So here, we have this. He starts again. Then here. And then what does he do? He orchestrates an echo by widening the orchestra and putting the clarinet down. And then he stops. And we had this before. There, this is same thing. And then in the measure, this is measure 86 for people who want to know measure numbers. And it goes this way. But here he stops. And then he stops. And then he goes on. And then we have, this is he stops again. And only here, to there. So, the brilliance of this section is that he has set up an expectation in this measure with this going here, and then he does it again, and instead of just going on, like that or whatever, he stops, and to go through the motion of this one measure, measure 86, he takes 7 measures. It's stopping. So, in a sense, this ending has Mozart stopping time. So instead of something going like this, or slowing time down, that way. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of how to actually look at this and how to play this section? Okay, after I've gone through all of this stuff here. So we have here, and it's very delicate because you don't have even, if you trust his orchestration, there's no bass, only cello and things in this high register. So I would say, and then it can be more. The orchestra. And then he stops. He stops again. Again. And then and you have one of the most, I would say, magical endings in all of music. And he simply does it by setting up the expectation of something, or setting up a time, a structure, I would say, which goes like this. And then stopping. So that time is slowed down, in a certain sense, to the nth degree. And I think with that, we also can stop. So, yeah, it's very remarkably wonderful. Please be well. Be careful now. I think, now that things are opening up, I know I've been staying inside. I'm really hankering to get out myself. And I hope to see you again in 1 week, which will come very soon. Take care. Thank you.